Hello, everyone. It's Laurie and Jenny of AstroPath, and we're here today to do another one of our Astro-biographies. Today, we're going to be talking about Monica Lewinsky, an absolutely fascinating woman, a fascinating chart. I'm sure you all know something about her. Before we jump into that chart, I just want to introduce us. Jenny is of Hidden Path Astrology. You can find her at hiddenpathastrology.com. And I am Laurie of Astrolore. You can find me at astrolore.org. And we come together to do videos about the moon phases, about the monthly astrology, the look at the monthly astrology, and we do these astrobiographies, which is really the funnest thing we do. So that's what we're doing today. Monica Lewinsky. What do you have to say about that, Jenny?
As always, we like to encourage you to watch a documentary or listen to her speak or, something like that. And she is in a bunch of different podcasts, I noticed. But what I watched was her TED Talk, which is only 20 minutes long. It was in 2015, I think. And it just right away shows you her courage. I'll just say that. We'll get more into that. What did you watch? Is there other things you saw, or is that the main? I think there's something else.
There's something on, I can't remember whether it was on Hulu. It's American Crime Story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a thing about the whole drama, the whole scandal with Monica and Bill. But really that TED Talk is really good. And I really wanted to kind of come at this chart from the perspective of her and not this story we've all heard about her.
Yeah.
I'm going to take one momentary pause in the middle of this to say, if you're still listening to us here a few minutes in, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video and share it. But back to Monica. Yeah, it's really good to kind of hear her own personal voice. There has been so much written and said and talked about her, and to hear her own voice and to really consider what her life was like in the middle of that scandal. This woman has lived a hell of a life at a very young age. The trauma that she was put through, and how she has turned that around and brought her voice in really important conversations.
Yeah, and what I was interested to learn also was just how she was talking about it was the first online scandal. Yeah. So it was the first case of everybody hearing about it online and clicking on it, and just making this whole thing blow up overnight. And it really just showed the power to kind of destroy lives of the internet. And so that's also what makes her story unique, is that she was kind of the first victim of that happening. And so she talks a lot about cyberbullying and what that is and how to combat it. And that's kind of what she's using, her life story, what kind of work she's doing with that. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is very powerful. And I love how she talked about, the reason these stories get so huge is because, everybody's looking for clickbait because that's how they make their money. So one of the things she talks about is really developing a real awareness of when and what you click on, and really understanding the painful stories that might be behind that and that you might be contributing to that. And I loved how she also talked about just the simple act that if you do see these stories, write an encouraging note, because everybody's so ready to beat people up online, and people lose their lives that way. And she's a very fortunate woman that she had family that supported her, because she was totally devastated, completely devastated. And at some point it might be fun for us to do an exploration of the transits that she was going through at that time. So that was really powerful.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of what she just is encouraging people to put out there is empathy and compassion. And I know it's something that you and I like to talk a lot about, and part of the ways you can really use astrology to open your mind. And Monica Lewinsky falls along with that. So, all right. Should we open up her chart?
Yeah, let's open up her chart. And the other thing, I just want to say, to those of you who know very little about her, She was only 22 years old when that whole
Mm.
scandal hit. And I think that's something to really understand as well. This was a very young woman with a lot of naive, what's the word? Very naive at any
Yeah.
rate.
Yeah.
Very naive young woman.
Yeah, just yeah. Because I mean, I think her TED talk starts out with like, "How many of you did things you regret at 22?" And pretty much everyone's like, "Yeah,
Right,
we
right.
all did." So,
Yes. Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
this is her chart, and what we're going to do that same breakdown we usually do, which was we start with the midheaven, which is the place where the person shows up in public, and then we'll kind of go from there. So let's right off the bat, we have a midheaven in Cancer. What do we know about Cancer? I mean, Cancer is the sensitivity.
Yeah.
We'll start with that. It's a
Yeah.
water sign. It's associated with, we were talking before, sort of the energy of nurturing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that
Yep.
is interesting to think about how the midheaven tends to be much about career, vocation, or reputation.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's an idea that there's something about those things that she's known for. Huh.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and having that, and right next to that midheaven we have Mercury, and
Right.
so right away we're thinking about somebody who's has showing up by speaking, and this
Right.
is actually what she's doing now. So that's a good.
Right.
We're off to a good start.
Yeah, we're off to a good start. Her south node is also up there, which just
Mhm.
indicates that she really came into the world having this sense of sensitivity and kind of, I think of Cancer as, it's kind of where we wear our heart on our sleeve.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so she goes into this public realm, her job happened to be what it was in the White House. But she kind of goes into this outer world with a lot of sensitivity, wearing her heart on her sleeve. I think there's
Mhm.
a real sense of innocence in that early on in a person's life.
Yeah.
Cancer is just there's an innocence there.
Yeah. I mean, I also think of the key word is vulnerability here.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
and the other
very
thing that
much.
catches my attention, so you have this person vulnerability, we've talked a little bit about speaking, but also that Mercury is retrograde. So what retrograde is going to make
Right.
it harder. It's just going to make it more difficult. There's a much deeper need for her to go in and be introspective and do some hard work in order to be able to speak her mind in public, which is
Right.
ultimately what she's working towards. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of that symbol right there just shows you that, she really has had to go in and deal with the fact that she's kind of a maverick. She's kind of an outsider through that retrograde thing and how she communicates, and
Right.
really work with that. So
Yeah, and the other thing that
yeah.
I think about, the other kind of keyword for Cancer, the protectiveness. And you see how
Mhm.
she's using her voice now as a real older adult woman, really using her voice to protect the vulnerability
Mhm.
of other people. So she's really doing some good work right now, which is a lovely thing to see, that she came out from under that
Yeah.
incredible vulnerability herself, but that's what taught her
Yeah.
where she needed to bring that energy.
Yeah, and
It's
I'm
really
glad you
interesting.
mentioned the South Node up there too, Lori, because that's also kind of a second underscore of like, this was hard work for her to get there, because the South Node is often a place that initially feels comfortable, but it's something you really have to grow out of. But at the same time, you don't want to discard everything that you might have learned from that South Node. So there's some work involved in kind of teasing that apart and figuring out what things do you need to bring forwards into your life. And so you add that to the Mercury retrograde, you already know that she's had to do quite a bit of work to dig in and deal with her own vulnerability and face that humiliation and shame. So I think it's a good symbol for
Yeah,
all that.
and what's really also interesting about that, as you're talking about it, I'm thinking, yeah, I think of the South Node as someplace that we have to really stabilize that area
Yeah.
before we move into
Yeah.
the North Node. This area really takes up a great deal of our lives, and we kind of do a dance back and forth. When we're older, we kind of land more in that North Node space. But I thought it was interesting because you and I were thinking, well, what's her personal life now? And who knows? You can't really find out any information. General consensus is she's never been married or had children, but nobody seems very sure of that, because she has kept very private. Her personal life is not on display, which she really learned the cost of having her private life on display. So that movement toward the North Node really brings it into, I have to be very serious, take responsibility for the privacy of my own inner home life. So
Yeah,
that's kind of
great.
beautiful to see that. I'm glad we
Yeah.
don't know anything about her.
Yeah,
home
it's sort of
life.
an indication she's done what she's needed to do and matured in the way she's needed to mature.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, she's clearly, she's
Yeah.
doing the work. So she's doing this dance.
Yeah.
She's doing the dance back and forth. And I bet when she's in her late 60s, she'll be probably, you know, even more inward. We probably won't see a lot of TED Talks. Maybe she'll be writing or doing, you know, not that she won't be still putting her work out into the world, but it will be less and less her showing up publicly, I would expect.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing I wanted to add to that picture, because we talked about Mercury in midheaven, is I can't ignore that Mars squares both of those. So having that Mars squaring, that puts a lot of pressure on that midheaven and Mercury up there. And that just really kind of indicates that in some way that Mars really brought about the challenge. And when you see that Mars is in Aries, it's in this sort of assertive go-getter sign, and it's Mars there, and it's the 7th house. And this is very much a statement about her pursuit of well, men in a sexual way. Yeah. I think that that's part of it. So that shows up as the main challenge to this. And yeah, that's what happened, right?
Yeah, Chiron is right there, exactly conjunct that Mars. There is a wound in relationship with strong, powerful, masculine energies. Okay, so then the next thing we want to look at really is her ascendant, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we can do that. Yep.
And that immediately, I mean, here, you know, we cannot separate these things. But let's just talk about Uranus is conjunct her ascendant. When she came into the public eye, it was sudden. You know, what is Uranus? It's like Uranus on her ascendant, this personality is going to suddenly be on display. That's a loud statement. And because it is one of these outer planets, it's a cultural thing. It's not something that's hidden. Yeah.
And also, I know you always mentioned how the ascendant is also like how her friends know her, how people know her on the personal level. And in her case, it does not really, as you said, there's not an ability to separate the two things. But nonetheless, I would imagine her friends see her as a game changer with that Uranus right there. She's somebody who's shaking up the status quo. She's doing something different. She's bringing about change. She's jackhammering up something old and tired that needs to be broken apart. Right. And that's kind of, you know, what that's about. So
yeah, and it's so interesting too, because it's Libra. So, you know, if you just look at the sun and the moon and the rising sign, you know, she's a very dynamic, sensual, beautiful woman with this unusual ability to put her energy on display.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, that Uranus right there. And it's exactly opposite that Mars Chiron conjunction in the 7th house.
Yeah. I mean, that is a powerful, powerful T-square. I mean, a cardinal T-square. So this is initiating things, taking charge.
In the angular sun houses.
So really just a powerful signature that you just cannot escape in this chart. And then, you know, just Uranus and Mars together is very volatile. And so that's going to really kind of heat things up. And then it all comes about with how she wants to communicate. So she's had quite the cross to bear, right?
Public, yes.
Yeah.
The 1st house is self. The 7th house is the relationship. 10th house is public. So here we've got this unusual dynamic that just blew up into public view. It's so almost, it's so simple, really.
Yeah. Are you ready to talk about the sun and the moon?
Sure. Sure, because neither the sun or the moon are part of that incredibly strong T-square. So let's make that T-square go away for the moment. And let's look at that sun.
So
What
she's
an
a Leo,
interesting,
first day of
yes.
Leo there, in the 11th house of groups. So showing up in her community very much is that playful, generous, out there performing Leo. Is sort of the shorthand for that. And the sun rules Leo. So really there's nowhere else to look as far as rulership with that sun and Leo. It's right there, and it's just shining up there in front of people.
Yeah, Leo just wants to be seen. So she, it's really interesting because she shows up in the world. She just is shining. And she, one of the things with Leo is the ability to be recognized, the ability to stand up in front of the world. And, even with her devastation, she has come back and stood in public. And I have so much respect for her.
I mean, that's the thing. You're exactly. I mean, I feel like she has very masterfully wielded the symbols in this chart. I mean, she has taken charge of her life and has, I see that Mars we were talking about earlier is the most challenging problem in the chart, and yet it's the one that she's wielded in order to stand up and do the things she needs to do. And she's a fire sign by being a Leo, and so it's copacetic with that fiery Mars and Aries and the fiery Leo. She's a pretty fiery person, and that's all about the selfhood and putting yourself out there in the external world and standing, with courage, basically. So
she made some mistakes. She fell in love with the wrong man. I mean, that's what she starts out that TED Talk saying that too. How many of you have made a mistake at 22? And she clearly fell in love with the wrong man, but you can see pretty clearly that for who she is, she kind of had to fall in love with the wrong man in order to learn what she needed to learn to do the work she's done. And that Leo that Leo sun in the 11th house, really needing to be seen. That's powerful. And then the moon in Taurus.
The only thing I want to add about the sun there is it does oppose Jupiter, which just makes it bigger. It's a pretty wide orb, but kind of completes this into sort of a T-square. So
it does, doesn't it? That's that creates a T-square here.
She's got two.
She does. That's interesting. I mean, the orb between the sun and the moon is even a little wide, but not terribly. And the moon in Taurus, it's so funny because, like you said, she's a very fiery, dynamic person. And yet that moon just really wants to be calm and have things a certain way and doesn't really want all that fieriness.
And in using some of the Hellenistic astrology techniques, it's like that moon, it's exalted in Taurus, it's in a good placement as far as it's copacetic with the sign, but it's in the 8th house, which really presents a lot of difficulty, really having to deal with other people's judgments, other people's values, other people's crap all the time. And, but fortunately, because it's Taurus, you've got to think that she has been able to draw boundaries around her emotional state in order to survive the humiliation of the scandal. And and if you look at it that way, it's kind of like, yep, that makes perfect sense. That's where the moon is. I mean, it really, it kind of pulls those two symbols together of Taurus and 8th house.
And it also makes me think, all that 8th house and dealing with other people's judgments and all that. And the moon also being a symbol of the mother and how she talks about her mother taking care of her when she was really suicidal, and her mother slept in the room with her every night and, really helped her through that time. And so that strength of that moon in Taurus, that mother being there to help her navigate all that horrible stuff she had to endure.
That's a beautiful great point. That's really, really good. That support. What else do we want to say? I guess well, the other thing I was going to say too is also we haven't mentioned that moon rules that midheaven stuff we talked about in the beginning. I mean, the moon rules Cancer, and so that how she deals with all that is what kind of opens the door for her to work with the career. How she deals with her emotional state, I mean, gives her the strength to appear in public and
the ability to navigate her own emotions in the face of other people's judgments.
Yeah.
That's so, yeah, that's really important. And this is a third quarter moon, I believe.
Yeah, it's that very end of the cycle. So this is the keywords for that are things like, revise, reevaluate, turn away. So she's had to turn away from all that she's known in order to kind of face her destiny, so to speak, to face this challenge. She's had to be willing to kind of cut ties. She probably did lose a lot of connections with people and through all that. And also just like, I can't help it. I mean, she suffered so much for all this, and Bill Clinton doesn't suffer at all. I mean, it's nobody comments on his reputation, this and that. And it just, oh, ha, 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 Bill Clinton's slander. And like, we're meanwhile, it just kind of destroyed her life. And I just think that's such a typical thing that happens to women in our society, where all the men are kind of like, good job, rah, 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 and the women get the shit. so good on her for standing up and turning it around.
It's so interesting to see how, all that Leo wants to shine. The moon is saying, well, we've got to put boundaries around that shining. And the fact that the path of the life is toward this privacy.
Yeah.
So it really works together in such an interesting way. I've watched her TED Talk a few times, and last night when I watched it, I just kept thinking, I want to sit down and talk to her about her chart. I love it. It's really a beautiful, powerful chart.
Yeah,
it really is. And she's just been, she's been through a lot, and she's done very well with it. Okay, what else?
Well, I think the other thing the last main piece is just simply the fact that she's got Libra rising. So that means that Venus in Leo is the ruler for chart when you use that type of thing. And so Venus is very important. Venus is in Leo. It's in, again, the 11th house of groups. It's kind of helping out the sun there. It's not a conjunction, but it is kind of helping out the sun. So it's moving the whole, if her life is a ship, then Venus is moving that ship in the direction of empathy and compassion and generosity. And that's what she's doing with her talking. She's in being the protector of other people, but saying, hey, let's be empathetic towards each other. Let's be compassionate. Let's find this sense. And that's to me a very sort of gentle Venus thing.
And it didn't come totally easy to her. She had to learn that compassion, that square to the Neptune. She had to really learn that compassion through what she went through. But there is that, in that Neptune squaring the Venus, people with all their judgments, could she get involved with a married man? She was in love, and she had some, rose-colored glasses on with that Neptune squaring that Venus. It was very easy for her to, kind of, I mean, it was inappropriate for her to get involved with a married man, and she was 22. And he was a very powerful man, and she really was attracted to that. So we forgive her for her foibles. We are delighted she survived her incredible ordeal, and that she came back and is using that to try to do some good in the world. I adore this woman. I think she's awesome. I want to meet her. Okay. Anything else?
I don't think so. I mean, as ever, we could go on and on, but I think we've covered the basics. We've gone through the three main things you like to go through. And
all right. Yes, we could. I could talk about this chart for at least another hour, but I hope some of you have stayed through and listened to this and learned something about how we work with it. And thank you.
Great. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Jenny. We will talk soon.
Okay. Sounds
Bye-bye.
Bye.